Hi there, I'm Chris Kennedy from CAMSYS. Today I'm going to tell you about an exciting new feature that we've added to the MagicQ software to improve programming experience. So we've had for many years the ability to make group effects within queues so that your queues are based on groups. Now we've expanded it so that you can have the whole queue with levels, times and effects all based on groups. This enables you to have your whole programming based on the groups so that at any time you can just change the heads in the group and the programming will be recalculated for those new heads. The programming stores the fans, the times, everything that you need based on the group attributes rather than individual head attributes. So let's take a look at the software. Today we're going to use the Chauvet demo show. In the Chauvet demo show you've got some generic dimmers, you've also got some Chauvet spots, Maverick spots, you've got some Rogue R2 washes, and you've got some Chauvet Rogue R1 beams. You've also got some Chauvet Nexus panels which will allow us to demonstrate multi-element mapping. So in this show here I've got some playbacks, and if I show you some of the playbacks, I've got some cues on my spots and my washes and my beams. And if we look at those cues in the queue data by opening the queue window, you can see that they have information for all of the individual heads. So for example, this spot queue has got heads 101 to 112, all individual data. So we're all used when we're programming MagicQ to go and select a group. Perhaps you then start by locating, and in the programmer you'll see that you have all the individual head data, and when that gets recorded that goes directly into the queue. Now what we're going to do now is to change MagicQ into a mode whereby we're using group queues instead of the individual head programming. So how do we do that? Well, we go to Setup, View Settings, and then under queue storage you've got this new option, group queues, and the options here are prefer group queues but warn. That warns you if you're going to program queues that don't have groups in them, that are using head information, and finally group queues only. In this mode it blocks any recording of queues that are not group queues. So I'm going to choose prefer group queues. So now that I've got preferred group queues, I can go back to my group window and I program exactly the same way as before. I select my group, I can locate, and you can see in the visualizer it's done exactly the same thing as before. But if I look in the programmer window, you can now see that instead of individual head information for heads 101 to 112, I've got this group information, and it's storing just for that one group all of these attributes, and it knows that it's located, so it's storing that as the locate value. If I go to my position, I can tilt them as I would normally, and I can even fan them by going into fan mode and fanning on the pan. So if I show you in the programmer what that's done, that's still kept the group, and it's set the tilt and the pan, and for the tilt it's got a static value, one single value, but for the pan, because I've fanned, it's stored the two values from where I'm going from and to with the fan. If I now find a free playback and I record that into a queue, you'll see that it has, in the queue window, it's recorded that in exactly the same way. So it's taken the group information and not the queue information. When I play it back, it's based on the queue information. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start doing a programming of a queue step to demonstrate some of the cool features that this allows. So first of all, I'm actually going to make a new group. So I'm going to take my spots and I'm going to record them into a new group, which I'm just going to call Chris, my name. Okay. So we're going to program using this Chris group. So my first step in the Q stack, I'm going to just locate my fixtures. We look in the programmer, you can see it's using group 31 Chris, and it's just got locate values. So I'm going to record that on a free page here. It's my first step in my Q stack. So record the first Q. I'm then going to tilt and fan out like that. So that's going to be my second Q. So we've done a movement. I'm now going to do some colours. So when you're doing colours, you can use the shortcuts for timing that you can when you're normally programming. So for example, if I were to do 3 at a time, so 3 followed by a palette, it will change in 3 seconds. I'm going to do something slightly more complicated than that. So we've got a 3 star plus, which means fan, but into the centre. So I'm going to do that, going to green, and they're going to fan into the centre. I'm going to record that as my third step. And now I'm going to do something which is a new feature that we've added, which enables you to quickly do a fan across your fixtures. So if you're in fan mode and you select 2 palettes in turn, so for example I select red followed by yellow, it's going to fan those across those in turn, and it's also using the timing that I was using before. If I go into the fan menu bar by pressing shift and fan, I can actually select symmetrical, so that instead of fanning from the end like it is at the moment, it can fan from into the centre. So if I select 2 palettes, you can see now that it's fanning that into the centre. I'm going to record that as my 4th Q on my Q stack. And now if I run that Q stack, you can see that I've got my 4 steps. My locate, followed by my white fan, followed by my green, followed by my colour fade. You've got all of those steps. If we look at the Q data itself, you can see that that's entirely programmed on groups, each of the different groups. So what's the cool thing about that? Well, the cool thing is that now that we've programmed that based on a group, we can change the members of that group. So if I run that here, you can see that it's running on all those 12 spots. If now I select some different fixtures, so I've got a group here of only half the spots, what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-record my Chris group. So instead of 12, it's now going to have 6. And notice in the visualizer that straight away it's modified the cues playing back, so they're now playing back on that group of lights, just on the ones that are on stage left there. If I select a different group and re-record Chris, it will go to the other group. Again, recalculating across the number of fixtures. So where it has a fan, it will re-fan it across the number of fixtures in the group. So when you're doing fans, you're setting a start point and an end point and fanning between the two. And it's keeping all those times there. If I go back to re-recording Chris group with all my 12 fixtures, you'll see that now again it's going across all the 12 fixtures. And this isn't limited to fixtures of the same type. You can go to different fixtures. So for example, I've got my wash lights here. So if I reprogram my Chris group to use the wash lights, you'll now see that it's playing back that same effect across my wash lights. So this is the power of group cues. It allows you to change your programming and to do generic programming, which then you can apply whatever fixtures you have to. So if you're touring, you can build up your show as you go along, but just using groups rather than individual heads that you have on that particular day. So there's the ability here to be able to convert from a group queue into a head queue and from a head queue into a group queue. That's in the queue store window, where you'll see we've got these set group queue and set head queue buttons. In fact, if you use Shift, you can do set all group queue, and that's going to convert my entire show into using group queues. And it does its best to match the data in the queues, which have been programmed using individual heads, to match them to groups, so that it then is based on groups instead. So if I go back to my first page where we started off and show you my original spot group, you can see here that it's in the queue window, it's just using one group, group 7. So the whole show now based on groups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just save that show and say Chris groups. So we've got this show built on groups. Anytime, if we want to take that to an older console that doesn't support group queues, we can do the opposite. We can go back and we can convert it to individual head queues and then load that show into the old console. But one of the advantages of having it based on group queues is that I can now go and do something that I would never tell you to do before. So I'm going to go to the patch and I'm going to remove all of my patch. I'm going to just delete all my fixtures. So in the patch, select them all, remove them, and now my patch is completely empty. Nothing in the show. You can see all my fixtures have been removed from the visualizer. But if we go back to my programmed queue stack here, we've still got our 4 steps chase. And if we look at the individual queues, the information is still there. It's using the group Chris on each of the queues with that information still in there. You can see the data there. So there's the fan, then there's the green coming in, and then there's the cyan to blue fan. So that information's still there. So now I can go and choose another fixture type. For example, I could go and choose, let's go and choose a clay packy fixture. So I'm going to pick a alpha spot 700 HPE, and I'm going to patch 8 of those. So I've patched 8 of those. You can see them in my visualizer. Now at the moment, because I removed the patch, I've got nothing in my Chris group. But if I take my alpha spots and I record them into my Chris group, then now you will see that I've got the same queue stack with that effect. All the 4 steps that I programmed. So we've deleted the patch, but we've still got all our show programming. And sometimes you may need to do inverts and pan offsets and tilt offsets in the patch to get it to look like, because your fixtures may be the opposite way around, like they are here. But as soon as you apply those offsets, then you can just get on and use your show without having to reprogram it. So that's a real great benefit of group queues. The other benefit is that it makes the queues simpler, so that everything is just smaller information. You can easily see what you're doing, and when you're saving your show files, they're smaller, and if you're using multiple consoles, then it gets smaller as well. So that is group queues.